want you to think about the very worst time in your life. Like, if you would have never evolved from that moment, who would you be right now? Welcome back to the Butterfly Season podcast. I am so happy to just be spending this time with you guys today. And I want to share with you what dropped in for me that I'm really excited to talk to you guys about. And that is vulnerability, authenticity, and the power of it. And I have a background in marketing, advertising, PR, branding, all of the things. Ran an agency for 6 years that helped businesses position themselves, and whether that be on the branding front, marketing, public relations, ads front. And so I've noticed a common theme, a common through line, especially on TikTok, is that there is so much power in being vulnerable and authentic to who you are and not trying to be someone else. And I feel like when we hear people say like, oh, don't be someone else, it might not even be that you're trying to like be a person. It could also mean like different attributes of different people that you like about them and you want to embody that yourself. But sometimes that can come off as inauthentic. And my challenge to you guys today is to literally vibe higher, exist loudly, and be fearlessly authentic, even if it is scary. Part of this podcast, guys, literally is scary for me to be vulnerable and be authentic. But the amount of DMs I've received, the amount of feedback I've gotten on me just kind of showing my cards, who I really am, and some of the things that I'm going through, all you need is like one other person to just kind of say, hey, like me too. And you feel seen and you feel heard and you feel validated. But most importantly, you feel like I'm not doing this alone, because we're not. Like we all literally are experiencing levels of the same things, like different levels of the same things. And if we can just be authentic and vulnerable, you can have more meaningful relationships, meaningful conversations, and all of the things. And so I feel like people are scared to be authentic for a few reasons. You're either scared of rejection, you're scared of vulnerability, you're scared of change. And I kind of want to challenge that a little bit, but also kind of tie it into butterfly season. And like those three reasonings as to why people are scared of just like being vulnerable or existing loudly, being like fearlessly who they are, is very much a cocoon season. Like a caterpillar going through the metamorphosis, like in the cocoon, is literally an analogy for someone becoming their authentic self. And so just as a caterpillar sheds its old skin and transforms into a butterfly, we must also shed our old ways of being and change in order to become our true authentic self. And so I love butterfly season, but you know what I love more? Cocoon season, because it is literally the direct representation of self-discovery and growth that we all must go through in order to be truly authentic or lean into being truly authentic. Some of us are very authentic around certain people and not in other areas. And honestly, that can be a pretty great coping mechanism. When I was in law school, I was usually the only Black person in the class. Black and Hispanic, not only Hispanic person, but I am Black and Hispanic. And I would talk different. Like I wouldn't talk the same way I would talk with my friends as I would in law school or working at a firm or working for a judge. I just wouldn't talk the same. Like I wouldn't use double negatives. I wouldn't be like, girl, stop, right? Like I wouldn't talk how like I would normally talk. And I'm highlighting that because some of us are authentic in certain circles and some of us are inauthentic in other circles. And my challenge is, how can we be authentic everywhere we show up? There's so much more to unpack about being Black and law school and corporate and all of the things, not for this podcast, but that is just an example that you guys can see and try on to see, is that true for you, just in a different way? But back to the cocoon, similarly to, going through that like metamorphosis and shedding your old self to become who you or really live in your authentic self. When someone's not being authentic, you're like literally in the cocoon. You're hiding behind like a facade, protecting yourselves of vulnerability and rejection. But there's so much beauty in those spaces. Like there really is. So in the same way, a caterpillar has to like emerge as a butterfly. Like eventually we want to like come out of our cocoon too. I want to encourage you to come out of that cocoon of being scared to be authentically who you are. Like you literally were put on this planet for a reason. One question someone asked me, or I don't know if it was a question or a story, but it was like, there's a question in the story, but the story goes like this. If when it's all said and done and either you pass away or God comes to come get us, whatever you believe in, if you see a version of you of who you have the potential to be or who you were destined to be and the version of you who you are currently right now, is there a difference? Would you be happy with how you lived life? For me, the answer was no. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much potential. Like I was put on this earth for so much more. I'm not even living up to my full potential. But really, when I look at the barriers in the way are the fear of rejection, fear of being vulnerable, like all of that stuff. So to get out of this cocoon season, live in butterfly season as your truest self, like we have to reframe the meaning behind some of those fears. And the fear of rejection, we know, like Sometimes my words get mumbled and I don't know if that bothers or not, but we're just going to go with it because it's my authentic self. So sometimes rejection is just redirection. Oh my God, that was a tongue twister. Speaking of tongue twisters, this is just a side note. Last night, my husband and I, we were, I don't even know how we got here or why we started saying it, but he was like we were trying to get each other to say hard tongue twisters. And his was, sticky sticks are sick when they're statistic or something. Try to say that 5 times fast. It's actually pretty hard, but anyways, fear of rejection, redirection, that's how I got there. But all in all, I want you to reframe the meaning behind some of these beliefs because there is a benefit to them. So rejection, for example, we've all heard it. Rejection is just redirection, and it may feel bad at first, but I always tell myself, like, if not this, then better. And better always shows up. It's the same as the like lucky girl affirmations on TikTok. Like, oh, I'm so blessed. Everything just works out for me. When you start to say those things and repeat those things, like you start to just like energetically feel like, wow, I'm so blessed. Everything works out for me. Same thing. Like if not this, then better. And then you will always find better. Better will show up, especially maybe if it's not in the now, but in hindsight, you're like, hey, I'm glad I didn't do that thing because this is way better. The next one that I want you guys to reframe is vulnerability. I've experienced a lot of situations where people have kind of painted vulnerability in a bad light. And sometimes it isn't for everyone. And sometimes, yes, it can be like used against you. So I don't want to act as if it's all just rainbows and sunshine, but the beauty in vulnerability is like the deeper connections, being able to connect with somebody and process emotions more effectively. Maybe if someone has been on the other end of where you're just starting out, it can help you kind of collapse a timeline, if you will, or shorten your cocoon season by allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And if you're like me, you want to get things done fast and more efficient, being vulnerable is required for that. And creating that sense of trust within friendships or other people, or even finding it like in community or family, like that is the beautiful part of being vulnerable. I have a friendship currently where I can now like see a threshold, like once we've like removed that like veil and start to have conversations on more of a vulnerable front, you just feel like a deeper connection with somebody and a bond, and there's so much beauty in that. So I don't want you to shy away from being vulnerable, even if you have been burned in the past. And I might even explore, like, what was it that kind of burned you in the past? Was it anything that you could attribute to? Not to say that it's all you, but if we're wanting to look within ourselves, what are the things that you can do to change so that those behaviors don't happen again? And is there deeper meaning as to why you might show up in those ways, that you can kind of unpack also? If you haven't listened to the episode on self with the lowercase s and capital S self, knowing the difference and how it's so powerful, I would encourage you to do that, especially in relation to the fear of being vulnerable and creating deeper relationships with people and allowing yourself to kind of just be vulnerably who you are. But another and the final one that I want you guys to kind of reframe is the fear of change. Change brings so much good. I am a creature of habit. And so part of me saying this is also talking to myself. I will go to the restaurant and order the same exact thing over and over and over and over again and like really never experiment. So I've been trying to kind of get out of that habit slowly but surely. But I want you to think about the very worst time in your life. Like, if you would have never evolved from that moment, who would you be right now? Like, I am so grateful that I experienced some of the things that I experienced. I've gone through some of the things that I've gone through because they have made me such a resilient person. On the podcast with Keisha, if you haven't heard that one, I would go listen to that one too, talking about codependency in marriage and the importance of building resiliency. She shared the story, I think it was about monks, and that they planted trees, watered them, put sun on them, but they were like in a dome inside. And the trees grew tall and they were so beautiful, but they all just fell down. And the reason why they fell down is because they didn't build like strong enough roots to sustain like how tall they were getting. And trees roots get stronger with the outside elements, wind, rain, snow, all of that, right? And so they build stronger roots. And if you don't have those elements, those hard things, if you don't go through the hard things, you can't evolve as a stronger person. And so when I think about some of the very worst times in my life in high school, as an early teen, if I literally have never experienced those things and never evolved from that person, are you kidding? I would be embarrassed at how I would show up in life. And so I say that because I'm glad that I did. And so the fear of change is beautiful. And I want you to reposition, like, find the beauty that's come out on the other side of change that you've experienced, and lean into that next time you're getting resistance around change. Yeah, guys, life is so much more beautiful when we get past the scary part, live authentically, exist loudly, vibe higher, attract more like-minded people. Things just like feel easier. But what's required is the metamorphosis. Like, we have to go through that. So I hope this is a reminder for you today to push past the fear of rejection, vulnerability, and change so that you can live fully in your butterfly season.